Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Masterful Conversations podcast, where we learn about leadership from the men who have served or are currently serving as worshipful master in a recognized lodge of free and accepted Masons. My name is Matthew Wagstaff. I'm a brother in the craft, a proud past master of Eureka Lodge number 36, where at present presides our worshipful master, Jermaine Myers. And I'm with
Uh, I am Past Master Mark Alexander of Sons of Kings Lodge number 123, Brooklyn, New York, where currently my worship master is Fitzgerald Boyce II, and shout out to him.
Absolutely. So we both hail from the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge in the state of New York, where at present presides most worshipful Gregory Robeson Smith Jr. But before we get into our fantastic interview here today, I can't believe we are on episode 5 already on episode 5. Before we dive in any further with our guests, a quick disclaimer.
The information shared on our show is for entertainment and educational purpose only. The views are our own and do not reflect the views of our lodge or Grand Lodge. Please do your own research, especially within your own jurisdiction.
Definitely. And we have another Grand Lodge officer here today. And with that always being said, we still do not speak for the Grand Lodge today.
Definitely.
Just want to make that crystal clear. With that, I definitely want to say welcome and thanks to our guest today, Past Master Oswaldo Mestre Jr. Past Master Mestre is a Past Master of Ionic Lodge number 88, the lodge that I was raised in Buffalo, New York, back in 2004. He served as worshipful master in 2016. He is also currently the grand trustee or a grand trustee for the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge. Past Master Mestre is also currently the district deputy grand patron for Eureka Grand Chapter Order Eastern Stars Prince Hall in the state of New York. He is also currently the excellent high priest in the Royal Arch. The brother's busy. He is a past potentate, a past eminent commander, past thrice illustrious master, and he has also received the 33rd and last degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. So welcome, Past Master Mestre, to the show. We appreciate you, and we're looking forward to learning about some leadership from you.
Listen, thanks for having me. I think this is a great forum. Let's kick it all things Masonic leadership. How about that?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Before we get started, I just noticed that, so now he finished all 3 at the red house now. So now he's ready for the rope.
That's what we were talking about earlier.
You say this, you have to be invited.
You have to be invited. Yeah. You'll be at least qualified for the rope. Put it like that.
That is very true.
Well, good luck on the invitation. So let's jump right into it. So you served as worshipful master in 2016 in Buffalo at Ionic Lodge number 88. Can you just start off by just talking about your time in the East? Who was the Grand Master at that time? What was going on in Buffalo? How big was the lodge? And just sort of the programs and project that you had in mind as the worshipful master.
Well, one of through my Masonic career, it's being worshipful master. There's nothing like that. Being elevated by the brethren of your lodge and being put into a leadership position. It's there's nothing like it. And so I cherish that moment. The Grand Master at that time was Dorian. I'm sorry, most worshipful. Dorian Glover. When you share leadership, there's an informal aspect of it, and I should make sure I give him his respect. But great opportunity when I came into the craft. As you know, I do a lot of things within the community. I work in government here in the city of Buffalo. I work as a commissioner and do a couple of different things in the community. So knowing different people who were in the craft, who I did not know who were in the craft, was interesting, to be quite honest. When I first started, just having people around me, I was invited to different events, Ionic Lodge, I would go to different balls and different events, and I would just see these brothers doing some outstanding things, giving out scholarships to individuals and recognizing organizations, not always the most popular organizations, but those organizations that were doing things. And I just kept on coming back. I said, wow, that is just interesting. You know, a bunch of Black men, a bunch of brothers who are in communities. And I'm thinking, why did I not know about this before, right? You know, you hear about some of the Greek organizations, you hear about all these other organizations and civil rights and social organizations, and I just kept on, just was a little more interested more and more until my curiosity, and I'm always a curious individual. I decided I wanted to call up and meet up with somebody, you know. So I met up with one of the brothers who invited me, and I said, "Hey, let's do lunch. I want to talk to you about that." And all he was doing was just smiling and laughing, and I didn't understand why he was doing that, right? You know, and he would just listen to me, and I was like, "I just want to know more about this, and you know, how do you do this?" And he just kept on smiling, you know. And I said, "Well, you know, how do you join?" He said, "Well, you just did. I mean, well, you know, not that you did, you just started that process." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Well, you asked me about it." I said, "Is that it?" They said, "Yeah, you'd be surprised, you know, sometimes where curiosity will take you, or where just, you know, finding out more information." And so that kind of been the bedrock. You know, I've always been a person that wanted to seek light and more information about different things. And so, you know, we talk about seeking light, right? You know, and was that. And as I started learning more and talking more, and not that I didn't want to take his word for it, I asked another brother, and another brother that I knew who I had a lot of respect for started smiling at me again, you know, and I'm like, what's, you know, and he says, well, do you know about this? I talked about this. And he says, why would you ask me? He said, you know, I'm a Mason. I was like, really? I didn't know that. Not that, you know, I wasn't too curious. I asked another brother who I had a lot of respect that I knew I was around, and it go another smile again, right? You know, and it was just confirming that all of these brothers that I talked to were good dudes, good brothers, you know, did things in the community, but this was just of good ilk, you know. And I just thought, I was like, man, I want to be part of the good brother crew, you know, I think, you know, or not even that, just learning more about that. And then I went through the process. And, you know, as you do anything, I think we all go back to our roots, our family. And I remember, you know, checking in with my mother. And, you know, I'm in Buffalo, and I grew up in New York City. My family's in New York. And I talked to my moms, and it's like, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm going through this process. And, you know, it's the Mason. She's like, oh, really? She's like, yeah. She's like, you know, your granddaddy was a Mason, right? He says, I said, well, why didn't you tell me? So, well, you never asked. You know, I said, no, not my mother with the, you know, with everything. And um, that's how I started getting involved, you know, through sometimes this curiosity, but also, you know, we say that you were a Mason before you were, you know, you were that before you saw it. And
Prepared in your heart.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So when you were elevated, because I remember seeing you the day you were raised. I remember being there on that day.
Mhm.
Fast forward after being raised, here in Rochester, actually, by the way, with Brother Eureka, that was a fantastic day, by the way. We don't need to go there today, but that was a great experience.
It
Um,
was.
Fast forward, you were elevated to the Oriental chair. Um, Talk to us about being in that seat. What was that year like?
One quick question. How long did it take you to become worship master also?
It actually took me 5 years.
Okay. Curious on
Five,
that.
yeah, yeah, 5 years going on, 5 or 6 years. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to start. We talk about worship master, but I'm actually going to start, you know, when I was junior deacon, and then as junior warden, and I mean senior deacon, then as junior warden. I think putting the time and effort into understanding all of the different chairs and understanding the work. Uh, Again, you know, being an elected officer, you're elevated amongst your, you know, by the brethren, and to take that responsibility serious and to do the work, you know. In any Masonic house, usually the junior warden and the senior deacon, those are the workhorses, right? And those are the ones where you understand, and not only learning, you know, ritualistically, but also taking that moment to understanding the ebbs and flows of a lodge of brethren, and I really took time to understand that, the lodge that we are from, we're considered in the 7th district, which is in Buffalo, New York. We were the silk stocking. I didn't understand what that meant. Every lodge has um, their habits and their methodologies,
And their culture,
their
basically.
culture, right?
Hmm.
We have a mother lodge. When we say our mother lodge, not in terms of Boyer, but up in the 7th district, which is St. John's. Our lodge, we meet on Fridays in our study sessions. Classes are on Saturday. Our lodge, when we first started, was dentists and lawyers and doctors because they had to meet a certain particular time, and that kind of ebbed the flow of what we were at in terms of um, men who still wanted to be Masons, and with Masons, brothers who come from all ilks, right? And we started that, and so learning that history and being in that chair, understanding and meeting different folk, we had different folks, in our lodge, past masters who had been there generationally, but also have been served in the East many times. And so when we came in, um, our class that we came in was kind of bridging the gap, right? We were known for going in and we recruiting and working with younger folk, and we did that, but we also make sure that we connected. So started as junior warden, understanding, moving up to and elevated as senior warden, and then becoming worshipful master. I say that because the elevation starts, when other brothers see you and want to put you in that position. And you know, leadership wasn't always foreign to me, but um, making sure that we were communicating and I was communicating with brethren. I'm a transactional type of person, understanding more about the workings of a lodge, the business aspect of what we're doing, making sure, our financial, when I say transactional, our paperwork, all of the things that were in order,
Hmm.
um, and understanding that. I had sat on our audit committee, which gave me a great perspective on the workings of a lodge, the ebbs and flows between a treasurer and a secretary,
Hmm.
and the role that a secretary can play. Right. People think is the money person. I mean, the treasurer is the secretary, which plays a huge role in making sure that that relationship and understanding that too. So I was always that transactional person. The ritualistic I enjoyed. It was something to watch and go every time I watch a degree or see something. I always stand back. I think, wow, okay, I just learned something. We've witnessed so many different degrees in here, so you're always a constant learner. And then brotherhood, right? Making sure that um, amongst the brethren that you not only create relationships but know you know people's birthdays, wedding dates, or important times in that mark. And because if you're going to spend that time with brethren, right, you have to know them, right, not know them on face, not know when you meet them for 3 hours out of a month, or at a study session, to know them, to give them a call, and when you see them, to generally be like, there's a brotherhood here. And I think that has to be, we can't take that for granted. That's because we have a title or you've been raised. Those things, ritualistics, they are part of what we do, but real brotherhood is the investment in time that we do with others. And I think that's what I tried to do as worshipful master, making sure that those ebbs and flows and those things were very, very important, and just being, having a humble heart about it too, and moving in a certain way because people looking to you for leadership, right? That's why they elevated you to that position, and we lead.
Yeah. And just to piggyback or add to that a little bit, did you have any sort of framework? We were talking about, like, I have like the 4 Bs, and Pastor Master Alexander had his framework. Did you have a sort of a guide or a framework that you worked off of your year in the East, that you said, hey, these are going to be my focus areas?
Hmm. Well, it was important for me to understand, and I told you I'm a pretty transactional person. What I meant was that the business of the lodge, right? Not only how to make sure that we lead folks, how to run a meeting, but also how to move, not that everyone understood where we were moving at, right? It was important for every time I prepared for a meeting that I create an agenda, right? And everyone had that. It was important that in our communications, I understood that some people couldn't come or not, to put the information in that communication, not to say, hey, we're meeting, we're doing this and that, but put information what would go in, what was important, what was not, any important votes, or all of those particular things. That was important. And also making sure that we were prepared, which meant study, which meant fellowship. Sometimes fellowship turned into study. Even when we were communicating, some people say, how do you communicate? You can communicate masonically or whatever. If you're in a ritual, you're talking about that. There's certain things you're going to be talking about. I remember when I was going through with my cables, and we would celebrate when we get mad. We would joke around. We get mad masonically. We would go in the book. He said, "You said this and you did that and that and that." But then we smiled and was like, "Wait a second, we got this, right? We're speaking about it." So I think, when I talked about being transactional, showing a degree of, the business of what we're doing with the lodge, brotherhood, in terms of how we communicate with each other, um, the foundation in terms of where we're at ritualistically and what we're moving, meaning that our degree work, the entry points of how we come into a lodge, but also being gatekeepers and who we bring in too. That's a very important thing. I don't know if we spend enough time. The ultimate responsibility that we have as Masons, in one respect, is to be gatekeepers, because this is our fraternal organization. I don't know if we spend enough time to say, listen, be mindful about who we bring in here. Don't be mindful about it after they're already in, right?
Mhm.
Be
Yep.
mindful and do that too. So.
Guard the West Gate.
Yeah, guard the West Gate, definitely. I know that you stressed about like the communication within the lodge and whole, but as worship master, how did you like deal with your officers as far as communicating with them, making sure they bought into your program and help you accomplish what you needed for the lodge to accomplish?
Mhm. Well, I had a unique thing. My officers are people. My senior warden was my cable. My
Hmm.
junior warden was our assistant dean who brought us in. Who was part of us. So we had relationship. We had a relationship. We worked together. We were able to
Hmm.
communicate. Before every meeting, we met. And the other aspect of it is I am a pretty transparent person, and so the work that we do, I just didn't believe doing this work. My job was to set the sails, to say this is where we're going, but it was also to be to share that load. Everyone needs to have skin in the game. But you have to define what that skin is, right? There's some
Hmm.
folks,
Mhm.
they won't sell the tickets. That's the guy you're gonna. There's some people who are stronger with the ritualistic aspect of it. Yeah, some
Hmm.
people have brotherhood all over the days, right? And some people are gonna, so understanding the ebbs and flows in those people, and then having all of that work together for the good, and setting the tone for that, so that brothers can work. And there are times where, um, you know, you have a lodge and you have leaders in there, and sometimes there's gonna be some sharp elbows, right? We talk about everything, oh, everything is going well or whatever, but that's what leadership is. How do you bring people together, right? Even when they disagree. And there are times where we disagree, but and I don't think that necessarily is the worst thing. I think you learn from that. I always say that nobody's perfect, but I am somebody's effort. That's what I just said that. I ain't nobody's perfect, but somebody put the effort and time and elevated or did those things. And so you have to um, you know, play into that role that people have seen into you, right? And understand that too.
It's always better to, when you're talking about, not getting along or, might not be all that harmony at the moment. It's always better to face the conflict than let it just simmer and be there in the background. It's
Let
better
Mhm.
all
just to knock
private
it out the way.
let all private animosities, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's important. I think
Hmm.
we understand this. I think there have been some seminal moments when I was worship master. You know, I remember when I learned, even before worship master, when I learned the opening and close, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, when I say I learned it, not spouting it because you were there, but I was like, wow,
Yeah, I understand.
awesome stuff, right? The
Hmm.
opening is sets the tone for the brothers who are in the lodge and how to prescribe to each other, how to work, how to
Hmm.
do. And then the closing is when we leave this lodge, right? Brethren, this is what we leave this. This is how you're supposed to act. This is what we're supposed to do. And in that says that sometimes when things happen, sometimes when you have an altar, whatever, there is a method, there is a way to deal with that, right? But sometimes we don't do that, right? We know we want to take it on our own, but there's always a path, like you said, Mark, always a path.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a book called Taking the Stairs, and I forget the name of that author.
Mhm.
And he talks about a story of, I don't know if it's like cattle or something like that. Like when there's a big storm, they like run to the storm versus running away from the storm. I forget what type of
Mhm.
animal it is. It might be cattle. And so every
Mhm.
time I sort of I get into like a conflict or I feel like there's some tension in the space, I know like it's got to get addressed at some point. So it's like, how can we just address it head on? It is what it is, and let's move on past it the best way
Mhm.
instead of trying to like avoid it, skirt around it, and years go by and nothing gets resolved. So I just remember that book. It's called Taking the Stairs. I wish I remember the author, but it was a really, really good book and keeps me honest when we start dealing with conflict and whenever
Well,
there's
as a worshipful master, sometimes your head is on a swivel, right? And how do we deal with that? You know, deciding, what is important and what is not, right?
Mhm.
Deciding that, making sure, and I don't know if I mentioned this, having a strong trestle board. Well, what is that? You put a trestle board when, that's not a document, it's your document, but you are inclusive of other people when you put that document together. And then your first meeting, you vote on that. And that's when you building capacity within your lodge or within the group that you have.
You voted on it. You didn't say this is what it's going to be this year.
No, no.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
You know.
All right, cool.
No, but that's
Like,
He want to
important.
be democratic and
Yeah,
everything.
no, but let me say this: you're democratic because I talk to, you have to have people skin in the game, right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
no, I get it. I get
When things go to left, I'm like, listen, y'all voted on this. This is what we want,
Exactly.
right? Because,
Exactly.
somebody
Mm-hmm.
gave me the gavel that,
it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what this year, this is what we're going to do because this is what we
Yeah.
have to remind folks. There's a process. It's a very deliberative process about what we do. Even the democracy, the government that we have right now, it's a representative democracy. It's a deliberative thing, and the lodge is a microcosm of that. We forget that. We're entrusted with that too. So it's not about this me or this and that. Some of the best ideas that we've done haven't all just come from me. It's come from brethren. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to know, you,
Mhm.
have to, be in the trenches with these, and I made it a point to do that, right? Even to the point when you're not in the chair anymore, right? When you're not in the chair, as worship master, we get those late night calls. We get those early morning calls. We get, calls from wives, calls from folks or whatever, right? You know, and I would love to tell you that stop, but that doesn't stop, when you come out of the chair, when you've demonstrated friendship and brotherhood,
Yeah,
uh,
if you build that true relationship, it's still going to continue. Yeah, I get it.
always going to continue.
Mm-hmm. Just to your point, Matt, the take the stairs, 7 steps to achieve success. Rory
Yes.
Vaden, yeah,
Yes. Rory
Rory
Vaden.
Vaden. That's it.
Yes.
Take the stairs, 7 steps to achieve true success. That's the name of the book. If anybody want to look that
Rory, if you're listening, we need a cut, just so you know. That book is good.
up.
Really good book.
Oz, one of our they says, the show is mainly about leadership, so we want to know, in your words, what is effective leadership?
Mm. Great, great question. Effective leadership, to me, is it's a few things, right? There's characteristics of effective leadership. you know Having a degree of integrity and being ethics. Ethics is important, right? But integrity is important. Being able to empower or equip individuals who you have who who have been part of this leadership change, um, effectively delegating. But I think ultimately, effective leadership here is that when you have left the chair, right, and you look back and you can leave back, and it's like, we're in good hands, right? Because people are ultimately doing that, not staying in the chair forever and ever and ever, right? But leaving it knowing that, there's a role that you play in a different way, right? So I think, um, you know, all of those particular things, humility, wanting to be able to collaborate. I talked a little bit about that earlier. Um, Having a degree of creativity is an important thing too. Being able to think quickly on your feet, but also being able to believe in the work that you're being able to do as well too. So I think those are effective leadership. But for me, you know, uh, understanding what we've sat on. I've spoken about this in terms of masonry and the length of time that we had. If you understand anything, sitting as a worshipful master, those who've come before you, right? We're in 2024, but I think about those brothers who were here in 1940 or 1930, right? Those brothers who kept what we are doing masonically or through the craft, right? Who were janitors, or they were, ticket takers or ushers on a train, right? They were cleaned up, and during the day you had folks just talk to them any kind of way or whatever, or they couldn't. Sometimes you've seen the brother, how we dap each other, be like, "Hey, what's up?" Back then they'd be like, they gave the head nod or whatever, right? And dealt with the injustices of everything. But at night, maybe one day out of the month, they would come together and they would say, you know what? We're going to pool our resources. We're going to send one of y'all kids to college this year. Or we're going to pool our resources and have a ball and invite our wives and our family to come. And we're going to call each other worshipful masters, illustrious potentates, senior wardens, because that's what we can do collectively today. And I think about sitting on those shoulders, right? When back then they couldn't do that. Right now we take those things for granted, right? And so that's the ultimate responsibility in terms of, how do we make what we do in leadership better, or if not, as good as what we had. I don't want to be the best person or the best worship master in my lodge, right? I want the person behind me to be the best, because if he's the best, then we are the best all together. So how can we do that, in terms of that, too? So you set that stage. Remember, I talked about, he wanted me to talk about worship master. I said, I'm going to talk about being a junior warden, right? And how that prepared me for being a worship master. I want to talk about being a brother. And so, as you sit in that seat, how you respect that. I think about those things. I think about, the courage it took for brethren to do that, right? To say, what, I want to go buy a, a bunch of land up in the Catskills with folks who don't look like me, right? And I want to put my money there, right? And I want to buy it, and I want to do something and have a place for brethren who look like me to go up there when there was no brethren, right? And look where we have it. We call it, we have that land right now that we're doing stuff. So those are
Yes,
the
yes. Shout out to Camp Eureka. Absolutely. Roscoe.
Roscoe, yep.
Definitely. So we talk about respecting the past. I think I'm hearing you say, respect the past while also preparing for the future. In terms of the leadership and the mindset that you had going into it. I'm curious now, as a past master, one of the questions we like to ask is, as a past master, Mark and I have 3 months or 4 months removed from being in the East. You have a couple of years from being in the East. And so you've had the privilege and or the opportunity, I would say, to have an engagement with other worshipful masters, multiple worshipful masters in Ionic Lodge, many of which I know very well. Just through my engagement with the lodge over the years. And so as a past master, when you got out that seat from 2017 until today, we'd love to hear about how your leadership has either shifted, stayed the same. How is leadership now as a past master? How are you interacting with the current worshipful master, previous worshipful masters? And how has leadership just sort of evolved for you?
Well, it said there was nothing like being a worshipful master, and I think being a past master, sitting in that seat, you have even the utmost respect. I mentioned this earlier here, is that it is important for me that who sits in that seat, to be the very best that they can be, and what role that I can do to help that person, and it's important, you know, because that's because you're the worshipful master, and there's a degree of effort and leadership that you have there. You definitely need to make sure that you have wise counsel, and our job is to provide that because we sat there, now whether that person wants to listen or not, but you're still there, right? Because everybody, charts their course, right? Because they see that. Like, that's why we've elevated them, not because they want to do their own thing, because we elevated them. Sometimes people get in their seat and like, I don't know what they're doing. I was like, then you vote for them, right? And so as you vote for them, you have a responsibility to communicate with them. Voting for someone doesn't mean that you just walk away. It means that there's active participation of what we're doing. And so the role of past master is very important. There's always those wise, sages that sit in the corner that offer good advice, not hindrance, not to relive your worshipful master days, or to right something that you did and maybe I could have did it different and you influenced that person or whatever, but to truly be help, because to help that person is to help the lodge, is important, because even when I was worshipful master, that we have some great past masters, but you also know that was a different time. We also brought in a lot of young brothers.
Yep.
So Mark, we up in the 7th district, and every lodge has their own cultures and things like that. But there was a transition, right? And we had a lot of worker bees, right? And we had one of the things I like about what Most Worshipful Greg is doing, or our Grandmaster is doing right now, is how he is making sure generationally, the leadership generationally, we're paying attention. And we had that in my lodge, right? Who sometimes they look at the world a little different, right? Or they transition,
Mhm.
and having to manage that and be a part of that is important. Even now, you know, um, I travel. I love to travel. Wag knows that I travel, and the brothers who I travel are the young brothers in my lodge. We travel together.
Yeah, man. I'm like, I missed all these opportunities to go to Columbia with the brothers out there. Yeah, yeah, it's all over the place.
Well, this is the deep part about it. So when we
Yeah.
travel, of course, we're going to enjoy our time and we're going to relax. But you know what we do end up? We end up going to find a Masonic lodge. We
Mhm.
end up together. There's always a Masonic story. Whether we somebody in the airport, there are times where we have our ritual. We just have
Yeah.
a little, downtime. We're talking and we're chopping it up. And so these are brothers that I didn't know before, right? But because of one common goal that we had and we built and we created, this brotherhood, we're able to kind of trust each other in different countries and create relationships. I remember when we were in Cuba, right? And I speak some
Yep.
Spanish. My father is Puerto Rican and my mom's is African American, and not a lot, but I remember we met a brother in Cuba, right? Who was from the Grand Lodge in Cuba, right? And we didn't know anything, but he recognized the square and compass that we had. And there was another brother who had a tattoo, and we were communicating. Now his ritual was a little thicker than ours, but we had this shared kind of relationship that we were able to spend. All of that because of what we did in the lodge in the United States, how we built, how we were able to communicate and talk to each other. So those are some of the great things that you just hold on to, as when you talk about leadership, and leadership is not being authoritative. You need to do this, you need to do that. There's different ways that we talked about, leading, passively and actively.
Definitely. You said something I definitely want to make sure that we don't miss. It's sort of a double entendre, and I know you'll appreciate that as being in politics. You said when you elect somebody to position, you don't, you also have to continue communicating with them. It ain't just that day. That's the same thing we should do with our political, people we elect to offices in real life.
Mhm.
When you need something, you continue that communication. It ain't just election day. That's how we get them to do the things that we want them to do. So I definitely didn't want to miss that part. And we were speaking on you
Makes us
spoke
better.
on.
Makes us
Oh yeah,
makes
definitely.
us better
Hmm.
leader. For
Hmm.
somebody who works for an elected official,
Hmm.
who was a public official myself,
Hmm.
um, as much as we say, "Oh, I can't believe this," it makes us better, right?
Hmm.
You know, and it keeps us to the mark of what we're doing, and it reminds us. Remember, I talked about it was so important for me to have that trestle board as a guide, right, and
Hmm.
have those tools, right? You know, and get buy-in from everybody. Um,
Hmm.
as much as I wanted to remind people, like this is what we're doing this year, right? People were
Hmm.
reminding me, I was like, listen, you wrote this. This is what you're at, and so that that's part of leadership too. That's that participatory, you know, some
Hmm.
people call it participatory budgeting that we do, participatory leadership. That's very, very important, you know, to usher that and have the atmosphere that somebody can come and talk to you about that, right? And be able to kind of, you know, say, hey, you know, and do it in a way that is important, right? You know, sometimes we check when we want to check with each other, we want to check each other, we want to do this, we want to call each other out. Well, you know what? Masonry prescribes a certain way how you should do that, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's a certain
100%.
way how you should do it. Not be like, you better be doing the whoa, 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 whoa. This
Yeah,
you need to
Yeah,
talk to me, right? Because I need
exactly.
to hear you, you need to hear me, and then we all grow together.
Yeah, 100%. I know, like I said, when you spoke also talking about the wise counsel you give your current worship master. So the question is, who was the men that gave you wise counsel as worship master, or just growing up in, growing in Prince Hall Masonry that you didn't listen to?
I love it. I love it. Ooh, that I did not listen to.
No, I'm only playing. I'm just
I
playing.
knew
I'm
you
saying
threw
he
that
he
curveball in
part.
there.
yeah, I'm only playing about that. But
No, you
yeah,
know
just
what?
in general. Yeah,
But you know what? If we want to be honest, and you know,
yeah.
I'm a pretty transparent person. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think to pretend that we do leadership and everything always works good, right? You know, sometimes things don't, right? And it is um, what you do in those moments when things don't. How do you react? Well, how do you grow? That's situational leadership, right? We pretend that we come into situations that are made perfect for us, right? You know, and sometimes we grow into those aspects of that too. So, you know, you don't get to be where we're at and sometimes not necessarily listen to some folks and then be like, appreciate that. You know, so that's a real question.
Yeah.
Some of the people that I've had a great deal of respect on his journey. I talked about one, past Grandmaster Dorian Glover. He was a grand. And I just remember watching his leadership style and how inclusive he was, and then how generational he was. Because it was important because the lodge, at that time when I was worship master, we had a mix of young and old, right? And when I saw when he came in as grandmaster, he was not afraid to pick different folks to be in leadership positions. There was some grandmaster past district deputies and things like that. He said, I'm giving you an opportunity. And it changed some of the culture of it. And I watched that, and I
Mm-hmm.
had a great deal of appreciation about that too. And he was
Mm-hmm.
always receptive to a call and understanding that, and he was never above, not being able to communicate. So I appreciated that. Um, and up in the 7th district, Reverend G. Michael Titus. He was a district deputy, played a strong role, made sure in terms of leadership, we were always on point
Oh yeah.
masonically.
Oh yeah.
Very, very important, was always on point in terms of our paperwork and all of those particular things.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of those, he was a stickler for that. And I said, there's something about that. But his leadership was through example, right? And I so appreciated that, you know, um, you know, in terms of that. And I think in my lodge, Matt will know this person, past master Michael Thurman, you
Oh yeah.
know, um, he was a giant. He was a worship master for 5 years in a row in our lodge,
Mm-hmm.
and you would never know it. And I actually knew him. Remember, I said there was these people that I knew that was just good people of good ilk.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even know they were
Mm-hmm.
Masons. Like were just doing stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And third degree. He was there. He was right there in front of me. I looked at him. I was like, "What are you doing here?" Smiling at me.
There
You know,
too for me.
yeah. But
See him at the gate.
beautiful person, and was just able to impart. But the thing that I appreciated about him is, yeah, he was the worship master 5 years, and he was his past master, but he always would reach back to young folk, right? Would always bring them in. Sometimes, you know, um, there's this, we do this work. Remember, I talked about it being here around for years and years and years, and some people, young folks, may get it or not, and I was like, and he was like, no, son, let's sit down, let's talk about this. I hear you, you hear me. Let's all work together. Past Master Thurman was that type of guy for me. He has since passed, and but made strong marks. So each one of those have made different marks, with what we're doing and how we're doing it too, and that's up here. But mentioned, most worshipful Glover.
Mm-hmm.
That's because I was able to travel. I didn't mention this, but as a worshipful master, you learn from the brethren, you learn from traveling too. That was an important thing. I remember having the courage as the junior warden going down to New York City in the Grand Lodge, and walking up into somebody's lodge, and how people say you can do it. It's your right. They can't, whatever, until you first do it, right? He's like, okay, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'm the junior warden. You gonna open this door for me? Walk up in here, or whatever. Until you know all of the parts of it too. But fellowshipping, traveling was key and important, because it opened up my eyes to some of the things that we were doing, as maybe some of the things we can improve upon, right?
Yep.
And being a messenger, it's like, yeah, maybe we need to do this a little different, and not be a dictator about it, but saying this is what we're doing. A big organization, and sometimes what we see and what we read is being translated, right? And we expect that it's being translated the right way, but it's being translated, but it's also being interpreted. And so it's interpreted as being translated, and by the time it gets to the seventh, eighth person, or it gets to this district and that district, or whatever, as much as we want to be zoomed out and we want to do this and that, until you visit and see it, you're like, oh, okay. And everybody's always trying to improve it, but it is what it is. This thing has been around for such a long time.
All speculative masonry here. So
it's
speculation and my speculation and Mark's speculation. Yeah, we all speculating around here, and we come together, and because it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Let me just reflect back on what you said. When traveling, you learn you might not be doing things as the right way, but at the same time, sometimes you get a self-esteem boost, and you're like, oh, okay, or at least we ain't that bad.
Well, imitation is the best form of flattery. Imitation is definitely the best form of flattery. But no, it's important, to travel, to understand, because you're right. So, the elephant in the room here is that we are one state. This Grandmaster teaches that, one family, no matter where we're at. One of the things that I heard from, past Grand Dorian Glover, we talk about from Riverhead to Niagara Falls, Riverhead to so it was important. And so I think we think, the ebbs and flows of what happens downstate in New York City, and then people come up to Buffalo and they say, wait a second, y'all got a black mayor? Yeah, I've had it. He's been mayor for 5 terms. He's been there for more than 20 years. People like, get out of here, or, because I'm constantly down in New York City, family and things like that, or vice versa. So you develop that relationship and those bonds together, in whatever district you're going to, you chop it up, and I think is an important aspect of it too, because so there's the lodge and it's the brethren, but don't forget about the community that the lodge is in. I'm going to say that again, right? So we are a microcosm of the people that we let in, right? And those people are from where? The community that the lodge is in, right? It's important, in terms of understanding. You can't say and do what we do without understanding about where we at with community. It's always been, I've always been a community-minded person. And so even in the year that I served, it was important that we collaborated, or we leverage other organizations' relationships. NAACP was important, and making sure that I invited somebody from the NAACP to come in and do a talk what we're doing. People say, well, you can't do that at open lodge. It's like, close the Bible, invite them in.
Exactly. Simple as
you know,
that.
like, what we doing here?
Hmm.
Let me see. Those are the absolute things as worship masters you can do, right?
Yeah.
I know you can do it,
It
right?
wasn't a vote for that. You didn't have to vote
Yeah,
for that.
no. Bible, boom. Brother Senior Boy,
Mhm.
Bible. Listen, yeah, come on.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
got to know to do that, though, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask this question though too. While we're talking about this, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking 1 year goes by like that. Like both Mark and I spent 2 years. You talked about past master tournament. It's been 5 years. The cliche is you don't know. You basically are learning the job the first year. The second year, you kind of, sort of, a little bit get your feet under you a little bit. Mark had 3 years of experience before he came over here, before he got over here. But so but I say that to say to ask the question of, if you were to go back, reflecting on your leadership, reflecting on how you've evolved as a man and as a Mason and as a leader, since 2016. If you were to go back in the East, again, like we always say, we know you don't want to go back into the East. And we know, we have other men who can do that job in the East in our respective lodges. But if you were to go back, what would you focus on now? Whether it's the same thing or something different, but what would be your focus, for this next go round? So if you were to be worshipful master of Ionic Lodge 88, 2025, what would be your core focus?
Um, so obviously doing those things that I've done before, brotherhood, ritualistic, transactional work. Um, I would probably even more now because it is the sign of the times of where we're at as a community is making sure that we had even a stronger foundation in our community,
Hmm.
making sure that those community organizations, sometimes, we're competing, our brotherhood we're competing and we shouldn't have to. We should be able to leveraging each other's relationships, whether it be in human rights or civil rights or those things right there. So I would make sure that we would be inclusive of those organizations, but also those things that are affecting brothers, right? And not be the closed organization that we can. If there's a brother that is being affected by, he has lupus or the sickle cell trait, or he has family or whatever, then let's learn more about that, right? And be able to kind of share that and amplify those voices of things that affect our community. And I think lodges are uniquely placed with that. I'm a history buff. When we had slaves moving from the South, they were hiding, but they were at many times in Masonic lodges, right, as they were traveling, right, and they played a role. And so, for me, I would probably be much more mindful about the role that the community plays with the lodge, and steer that, and making sure that you know it doesn't make sense to have a lodge if the community that you're living in is not as healthy, right? If we're going to be leaders and we're training leaders and we're being men among men, right? And many the brothers in the lodges are in leadership positions, to be quite honest, right? And when they come in lodge, and some people want to forget about it, and that's all right. I'm in a position. One of the great things that when I came in the lodge, then for me, the beauty of it didn't make a difference what title that I had outward. When I came in, I was just a brother,
Mhm.
right? Matter of fact, during the day, I'm getting phone calls when I came in. I was like, yo, what's up? What's going on? This and that. I wasn't commissioner. I wasn't this. I wasn't that. They saw me as a brother. And everybody comes to Masonry differently, right? But that's one of the things that I appreciated because during the day, I'm making decisions for this and that and that. Here, you know, we're on the first
Yeah,
grade, we're reading the second, we're doing all, we're getting that, or being mindful about, how was your day? What's going on? And I think those things were important. And I think some of those brothers knew who I was, right? But they, I
yeah,
just want to be a brother, period.
right.
And that's an important those things. So that's what I would do different. When I say different, I would add. I think, as I talk to past masters or those who served, I think, you know, making sure that community um, is being felt as we're feeling them, we're
Mhm.
out there doing those things. As you know, we have the Juneteenth parade, and we walk into the Juneteenth parade. Buffalo has the second largest Juneteenth parade in the nation. Period. You know, you know, WAG and I, when the United States and New York State was celebrating Juneteenth as a holiday, we were doing that already, right? Honestly, it wasn't a new thing in Buffalo. It was this is what we did, right? And
Mhm.
but that's history right there. What does that look like? And so we walk into that parade, so much so that when people wave, they see us coming and they know who we are because of the presence that we had. I know that we do that in New York and African American Day Parade, but what are those things of going to schools and not just, having a presence there? Those are things that I would definitely focus on and emphasize.
I appreciate that because I know that there's a debate, at least within myself and with other brothers, and we could probably spend a whole nother conversation, a whole nother show on this one
Within yourself,
about
you know, you know a bunch of people.
masonry, like the point of masonry, like by default, if I'm practicing masonry, me as an individual man should be a better person. And so the way I present myself to the external world does not necessarily need to be as Matt the Mason, just Matt as Matt, and I'm a better man because of masonry. And so the question becomes, at least in my mind, is the role of masonry to show up in the external world as Masons, knowing that we are Masons, but the brand of Mason, or is it to build better men so that when they are in the outside world, they are just better men, and then by default, society is better. And so it's kind of like the debate of, should our lodges be more visible? Our square company should be out in the broad day, like we should be everywhere with our jackets on, versus just being just good men, and then they'll know you by the fruit that you bear. And so that's kind of the,
Remember, that's how I started. I wanted to be part of the
yeah,
Good Guy Club because these men presented themselves a certain kind
yeah.
of, right? And I don't think you go through this and you can separate. Maybe people do that. That doesn't mean that people, when I say separate, this is a part of you. You
Yeah,
can't have this experience or not. Now, whether you want to highlight that or not, we can talk about that.
yeah.
But I'm a better person. I'm a better human being because of what I've been through, or understanding that, and I continue to be a better person because I want to do that. And if I want to be a better person, I want other people to be better folk, right? And I think those things, we learn those things, and I think you can't go through this and not experience that. Now, some people have different experiences, right? But that's why we are a band of men together, right? And we those experiences are shared. Not We're not a monolithic organization where there's a belief in this one thing and that's not that. Within that belief, we have different thoughts. And
Yes.
how we manage that, and those are things we.
No.
Mhm.
All right.
Oz, you brought up, well, let me get to Matt's point first when it comes to that debate he was having. It always made me think about, like, when we tend to harp on the famous Masons, and you kind of never see them with Thompson Squares and all the other stuff, but they did a lot of stuff to help us out as far as the Black community and the community in general. So, and they were Masons, so I kind of glean that way, where we don't have to show off all the light and all that, just be ourselves. And
As I wear the big PH.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I got something on, but that's we on a podcast, but that's about.
Yeah.
Also, you made a point, Oz, that I ain't ever think about in this manner. I always thought about it in the opposite way. When you said you came in, because you I'm gonna say important person in the outside world, and everybody comes to you, so the lodge was actually that sacred retreat as it needed to be for you.
It really
you
was.
you could sit back and chill, where most of the time we tend to find, I ain't gonna say I have came to the conclusion a lot of the times, brothers come in here where masonry is like their biggest thing. So this is where they get their ego boost. So they want everything. They want everything. Call me right worshipful. Stuff, things like that. So it's actually the opposite of what you're saying. So I definitely appreciate you expounding that, because it gave me a different view on just people in general, and how that can be a different way of looking at that sacred retreat.
Yeah, it is, and I think you called it because for
Hmm.
me, I deal with the 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 ebbs and flows of what happens in the city, and so even I went to I had to go to the tire place today, and I had a slow leak. I walked in there, and my cable was in there. Ron, and I was like, "Yo, what you doing here?" I was like, "What's up?" And we just kicking. Everybody's like, "What are they like? How do they know each other?" Right? 'Cause I hadn't seen them in a while, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Kicking it, and but those are the things that you do. Everybody comes to masonry a little different, and yeah, you are gonna get those people who feel like this is the ego, but then um if the organization or your lodge is what it's supposed to be,
Hmm.
uh, it will level set, right?
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think that's an important thing. Sometimes you have to be. The other thing I think as masters is when we show this degree of humility and patience, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes we have to edit ourselves, right? As masters, it's because you have the gavel, right? Which is a huge thought. That listen, it don't get any more absolute than being a worship master, right? But that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you exert that authority at times, right? And so sometimes
Exactly.
you have to edit yourself, or sometimes, even in terms of your emotions, you know,
Hmm.
you have to be able to do that. And those are important things that sometimes it's good to listen to past masters, who can give you advice and say, maybe you want to think about that. Or you yourself think about that. There are times where in a lodge, or there are times where even when I was the master and I said, well, what is this brother doing? Right. And you know, and we've had that. I'll share one thing. We were
Hmm.
talking, communicating, and one brother kept on getting up, and we were talking about, and we had vigorous debate about it. And was I forgot what it was, but I just remember we kept on talking, and after a while, I'm the type of brother I don't have debate, but either we're gonna vote on it or not, but it's not gonna be keep on debating to be dating. And guess what? As
Hmm.
master, guess what I control?
Yep. You chose. Yeah.
If I don't do
Hmm.
anything, I know, because as master, we got to know what we know, right?
Yep.
You
Hmm.
know, but you have to be able to do it and use it with equal regularity. Very, very important. And so he kept on, and he just wanted us to hear himself and this and that. And then I said, brother, thank you very much. And I did it without banging the gavel. And I said, thank you, we're finished. Kept on. I said, brother, you know, kept on. Bang the gavel once, he kept on. And I said, oh, okay. I said, Master, what did I do here? Right. He wasn't being
Hmm.
disrespectful, but he was, he kept on,
Hmm.
my brother. I banged it one more time. And I was taught, and we taught that when you bang that gavel once, you know, you ought to
That's
what?
it.
Sit down, right? And the
Hmm.
debate is over, right?
Hmm.
Keep on, and I'm like, okay, you know, um, and I said, let's think about this. And I said, okay. I said, um,
Brother Marshall. Nah.
no, I did. I said, I said, Brother Marshall. Brother Marshall stood up looking at me like, what am I do? I said, and then the other brother said, oh, this brother, he's serious, right? What he did, he sat down, right?
They got down.
So
Exactly.
the point that I say all of that is not to exert any power, is that as a worshipful master, you have to know what's in your tool belt, right?
Hmm.
You have to understand what those tools are. That doesn't mean that you use every tool, but it means
Yeah.
that you understand that. I talked about when I felt pretty good is when I understood how to do the opening and closing, but also me is like I'm kind of I told you I'm a transaction person. I went through the Constitution and I said I
Hmm.
got to know this thing because guess what? I have to defend this, right? And then I went through the bylaws of my lodge, right? And I had to know that. The time for me to know what was in the Constitution or in the bylaws was not in a lodge meeting. That was important because you're gonna get tested, this and that and that.
Oh
So when
yeah.
something happened, I knew what page to turn to, or I knew what to recite, right? Ahead of time. So those are some of the, we talked about tips to the trade for worship masters who are coming in. I think we talked about, you know, um, being purposeful, which is important, brotherhood, um, understanding the ebbs and flows, the business aspect of a lodge, how to set it up. For me, it was important to have um, an agenda So it wasn't, I wasn't the worship master that just had the agenda for me. I made copies. I gave it out to everybody, right? And so, I'll give you a little secret. So when you give and you give people an agenda, guess what? If I'm following it, guess what? They're following it. So that means they're not veering all over the place. It means we have an opening, we have a close, we have new business, old business, we have communication. Because sometimes
It's that.
we run meetings and there are people all over the place, right?
Yep.
You and I think if I can leave anything here is you have to model the way, right? Because if you are not modeling the way, if they don't see that you're doing it, they're not going to do it, right? They see you cutting corners and doing all of these different things. I talked about, the ethics of leadership as well. They got to see you doing it. You have to model the way, and I think that's an important piece. That doesn't mean that you can't have fun and the brotherhood piece, and sometimes they have to see you laughing and all of those different things, and I think that's a good thing. But at the end of the day, you were elevated amongst brother to lead, right?
Yeah. Especially when you have younger brothers, like younger in the craft. So when you bring in new men into the craft, their first impression of a lodge meeting should be the impression that you want them to take with them forever, really, or for a long time in the craft. And so when you bring a new brother, newly raised Master Mason to the lodge, and the worshipful masters joking around, playing, fumbling through the ritual, for me personally, I get kind of anxious by it. I'm like, come on now, we got new men in here. They're gonna take this experience when they go to Sons of Kings in Brooklyn, and everybody at Sons of King will be looking at them like, this is what these guys do up in upstate.
No, like this is what these brothers in Eureka do. I don't know. Them brothers are iotic. They tight. They're like this. They coming up in there. No.
Right. So as a worshipful master, you got a newly raised men, you got new men in the craft, or if you got older men, you got men that have been in the craft for a while, you want to set that example. So I just wanted to echo that. I think that's spot on.
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say also to just for the leadership too, especially, being that example, because I didn't heard it. I heard it before where like somebody got into a position like, well, he ain't never do that before. Why I got to do that? You know what I mean? So that's the type of thing. If you give the right example, the way it's supposed to be, you ain't got to worry about hearing that.
You do. Again, this is your year as worshipful master, and then as you do these people that you have led and you brought in, even when you've brought in some brothers, you do that. Matt knows that there's a bunch of young brothers. Just the other day, I went to one of the young brothers in my lodge, and when I say young, we were bringing them in their 20s, right? And it created a little culture thing, whatever. But at the end of the day, again, we are a microcosm of this society, right? There are some lodges, and I'm not saying you have to be grown, whatever, but we knew what we were doing in our lodge. And I think, actually this weekend, just because I had a relationship with him and I went, Brother Paulie Perez, he had did something in Buffalo.
Shout out to Paulie. Yes.
Young brother in our lodge, a whippersnapper, man. And he had he's doing something with real estate and home ownership and a couple of other different things. And I went there, and I saw him just to, I would see him, and sometimes we get a chance to speak with him. And I went over to him and I said, bro, I'm proud of you, man. And out of the blue, he talked. He said, listen, Brother Oswaldo, this and that, and there was in the midst of like all this transaction, everything happened. We had a moment, right? And I was just extremely proud of him and the work that he had did, but that's saying you don't take away, that brother did it. Did he do it because he was a Master Mason? He did it to some of the things that he did. It was enhanced, I believe, right? He was able to kind of present it himself and do all of that stuff. But masonry doesn't stop, whether you're just in the lodge or outside the lodge, is who we are, right? And I think that's one of the things that I tried to do. Some people just practice masonry while you are in the wall to the lodge, but we have to expand that, and I think that's what we try to do, in terms of those organizations and that too. So good stuff, man. All good stuff, man.
Definitely.
Matt, you got a final question, or you closing?
Man, we could chat for hours on this topic, man.
Okay.
That's so much. I think we've had a lot of good discussion right now. I personally have taken a couple nuggets from what Oz has shared with us. I appreciate you, Past Master Mastery, for being here. I appreciate you always leading by example. I see you move throughout our district. I see you move throughout our jurisdiction, and I see that you carry yourself in a way that makes me proud to be a Mason because of the way you carry yourself. So thank you for all you do for the lodge, for the jurisdiction, for our district. So thank you as a man, as a brother.
Well, thank you. Listen, both you and Mark, I've watched you as masters of your lodges and all the other different things that you have done for this Grand Lodge. And I think, although this is for entertainment, but I also think it's for education as well. I think not entertainment where we're rapping and doing all of that stuff, but for learning. And I think this is needed. And I think, we take for granted when people become worshipful masters, they're just fully equipped, right? And I think, how do we help a brother? Maybe a brother sees this and he said, I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna take that, and there's no cookie cutter thing on how to be a worshipful master. That's like we tell sisters who have babies, like, is there a book to how to or a father, how to be a father? This, you know, um, at the end of the day, we surround that brother, and we help them, whether they are part of a lodge or not. And I appreciate you and just having the courage to do this. Remember I talked about moving with the sign of the times. You know, back in the 30s, back in the 20s, back in 1910. There was a bunch of two young brothers who wanted to do something different, and they probably did it. So 100
It was
years
a
from
newspaper, but
there you go. 100 years
it
from
probably
now,
was that newsletter or
we're
something.
gonna be on some futuristic stuff, and they're gonna be like, "Them old brothers from Matt Wagstaff and Mark Alexander, I don't know what they was doing, but they was on some doom stuff." We're gonna be doing, we're gonna be like just thinking and talking to each other. Like,
Yeah,
why
exactly.
doing that? So I appreciate y'all, man.
Yeah, definitely, Oz. You gave us a lot of jewels to walk away with as far as in the communication between the brothers, building a relationship between your offices and your lodge itself, making sure everybody puts some type of skin in the game when it comes to whatever your lodge is trying to do. That'll help them get past knowing the past, because we are taught to do that in the first degree about as far as reflecting back and learning our past. So we want to definitely thank you for all that. Before we get over here, is one thing I do know that I want you to do that'll probably help brothers that may not know you or may not, get you a little connected to some brothers. Shout out your high school.
Oh, listen, those brothers in New York, you say one place you went to school. I went to Brooklyn Technical High School. It's the best high school, and not this New York City, not New York State, in America.
Wait,
So,
whoa.
Tech.
Well, it's at least the biggest. I can't talk about anything else, but definitely the biggest.
Shout out to hashtag Buffalo, New York. Yes,
so,
sir.
Let me say this. There's one known thing. So there were two technical high schools in New York State when they were built, and the foundation of that, two technical. There was one in Buffalo and one in Brooklyn. So Hutch Tech is a part of that. I'll accept that. It ain't tech though. But Mark, what school did you go to? I'm sorry.
I went to Eastern York Vocational, which was Transit Tech at the time. So
okay, see, all right. At least
all technical. Exactly. So again, thank you, Oz, for that. Matt, you can close us out.
No, thank you everybody for listening in today, spending your most valuable and precious resource, your time to listen in and view our conversation today. As always, if you are on YouTube, like, subscribe, hit the bell, do the YouTube stuff that you need to do in order to stay locked in to what we're trying to do. We hope that you took one or two things that you will implement in your own personal life to make you and your lodge or your family, if you're not in the craft, better because of it. So with that, we appreciate you all, and until the next episode, be great.